I think it's time to start. Everybody find their group according to your name tag. I think most of you know me. I'm Father Mark Thamert, and it's a real pleasure to be here and to join this crowd for the first time this summer. I'll be going on the June trip. So welcome to everybody. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to get a sense of where we're at, how this experience shaped your life in one way or another. The planning committee had an hour-long meeting, and it was almost as if we couldn't stop it. There were so many ideas. But the purpose is to get a sense of what you experienced, and also how that leads into the next question of where do we go from here. St. Benedict in his rule, in the very first verse of his rule, he says, listen to the words of the Master. Listen, O child, O son, O daughter, listen to these words. So we ask St. Benedict to come and open our hearts to the wisdom that will be imparted tonight. And for Benedict, unlike the other rule writers of his time, he wanted to speak to the heart in the kind of Old Testament sense. The heart was all of the whole person, body, soul, spirit. Open up your heart, open up your whole self. And with this in mind, this isn't going to be enough for Benedict. He doesn't want you to spend your life just doing that, listening and praying. He wants you to build together a school of the Lord's service. So the word service comes out almost immediately in this first paragraph, in these first lines of his rule. And tonight we're going to talk about opening our hearts more to what has happened to us, but also how that can spill over into service toward this school of the Lord's service. And there are lots of different ideas that you can explore about that. So our time frame is going to be, we're going to have a panel of 4 speakers who have wonderfully agreed to come and speak for us. So if you'd come up, please. We'll introduce them in just a moment. And we'll start with a prayer. Loving God, you sent St. Benedict in a very humble way. As a young man, he went to a cave, but his influence has been great in the world. Patron of Europe, father of monasticism. We are heirs of this long and beautiful tradition. Help us tonight to open our hearts to your Spirit, you as loving Father, that we might explore ways to be a greater service to one another and to people in need. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Shake.
Funny. Hi everyone. I do know every one of you, so thank you for coming. I really appreciate your time and the input that you're going to give us today. I don't know whether you know it or not, but you are actually participating in fulfilling part of our coordinate mission statement. That statement says that employees of this institution, these 2 institutions, have a special obligation to understand the nature of their employer. Did you know that that was in our mission statement? And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of legalese, but the intent of it is to provide insight to lay employees regarding the purpose and mission of the members of the Order of St. Benedict. So thank you again for coming. I'm going to introduce our panelists. Let's see, what order are they in? Well, Deb Lehman on the end here. She was on the May 2011 trip. She's the Director of Community Outreach and Fine Arts Programming. Next to her is Patty Epsky. She was on the June 2011 Heritage trip. She's executive assistant to our new president. I'm getting him straightened out and all lined up. Oh dear, I think he might be listening to this. Edit that. Next to Patty is Roger Narlock. He not only teaches in the psych department, but he's chairing it currently. He was on the May 2012 trip. And on the end is Brother Lou Groby, who's part of our monastic community, and he was part of the June 2011 group. So with that, I think we will start with their comments. And Deb, do you want to go first? Sure. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say that the spots I'm seeing are from the wine, but it's just a little anxious talking to all of you, even though you're fellow BHTers or soon-to-be BHTers. So I enjoy sharing my stories and my thoughts with you. I know amongst all of you, I am nothing unique in this, but I will never forget what the Benedictine Heritage Tour has given to me. From the preparation of the trip, through the shared and personal experiences, I was on a learning curve from the get-go, only there really wasn't much of a curve. It was more like a straight-up rocket thrust. I remember 2 years ago beginning my journey with this mindset that I'm going to go and learn everything about St. Benedict, the rule, its relevance to today, and how I might come back and create some wonderful project that would stand as testimony to my worthiness of receiving this gift. What I didn't expect to do is come back home with more questions than I left with. I did come back with an authentic point of understanding. I came back with Father Skidlarik's definition that Benedicts are an order without order. I came back and began incorporating Lectio Divina in my life and expanded that practice to include Visio and Audio Divina. I came back with a deeper personal understanding to our monks and our sisters. I came back with a willingness to take risks for my religious and my spiritual life. And I came back as a financial donor to the Benedictine Institute. I have been working with St. Ben's and St. John's for 28 years this June. I started in special events with Father Jim Tingerthal. Then I moved to the President's office, worked with our Father Hillary, Brother Dietrich, and then moved to my current position in fine arts programming as Director of Community Outreach. Bear with me as I explain a little bit of my job so you can understand how I've started to pull what I experienced into my work. I am fortunate to work with the dozens and dozens of national and international touring artists that we bring to both of our campuses. I present about 60 or more events, we call them residency activities, that connect the artists to our campus community in central Minnesota. I now use the values as a guiding principle to those connections. You can laugh, you'll come in my office, you'll see a copy on my bulletin board. You'll no doubt find one in my calendar, and you can almost always find a copy in the back seat of my car. And it's true, when I'm looking to create new programming that's outside of the box, or I'm looking to new partnerships, whether it's with vets who are dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, or young adults locked in the prison system that find no worth in their life, I look to the values for inspiration. Not only do I question myself, as I have for every year for 28 years, about whether or not my work aligns with the mission of St. Ben's and St. John's at a university and educational level, I now question myself daily as to whether or not my work remains true to the values of St. Benedict. All that I have learned during my journey 2 years ago and the 2 years since has given much more depth to my work. The one thing I haven't been able to do is to articulate fully in 500 words or less what this incredible journey has meant to me. So about 2 weeks ago, I had this great monk captive in my car. His car had broke down and I was giving him a ride back to campus. Since he was a fellow BHTer, I was really safe on emoting all over him about my 2-year struggle of trying to explain how I had transformed and what was happening within me and what was reflecting in my personal life and my work life. This man was very good with that old listening with the ear of the heart kind of thing. When we stopped and the drive was over, he looked at me and he said, "Deb, you found yourself a place at the table." And he was absolutely right. David Paul, I don't know where you are in this room, but bless you and thank you for your words of reflection. And I do pray every day that somehow in my work I might help others to find their place at the table. So thank you.
So I've been in the president's office for 13 years, and before that in the School of Theology, so I've always had the opportunity to connect with monks. Father Dale was the dean when I was up there, and there was numerous faculty members in the School of Theology, and then working with Brother Dietrich, Father Bob, and then all the work in corporate structure let me work with, Benedict and Robin and Abbot John and Abbot Timothy. So I've always had that connection, so I wondered what would happen when I did this. But I think the trip helped me connect with the founding history of the Abbey, especially the European history, something I just didn't feel connected to before. I kind of had a real good sense of their American history, but not. So that was really good. I worked with the Franciscan sisters, so it allowed me we went to Assisi one day with Lou and John Miller, and it allowed me to make that connection with the Benedictines and the Franciscans, and then when we went to Subiaco, there was that cool, graphic of Francis, so it was like, wow, that all came together for me. The monks on our trip, of course, Father Bob and Lou, and meeting our Benedictine volunteers, so it kind of brought the whole world in closer for me. Of course, like everybody else, making those connections with people on your trip, and with people not on your trip who have also gone, so I just was talking to Mike Connolly about when did you go and what was the best day, and so you always have that in connection. So when I came back, what I wanted to do was I wanted to find something really substantive and concrete to help ensure that the Catholic and Benedictine character of St. John's stays strong. It's part of our sustaining agreement with the Abbey. When we created St. John's Corporation a year ago, we created a sustaining agreement to ensure that the relationship is sustained, and this is part of it. So working on that a little bit. Like Deb, I make a contribution every pay period to the Benedictine Institute, so it feels like I'm, physically supporting that and doing that. I serve on the Institute's advisory council, and I do whatever I can to advocate for the Benedictine character and the Benedictine Institute at St. John's. I think mostly it just makes me feel like I'm a part of St. John's in a way that I never was a part before. It just really connects your heart and your soul to the Benedictine life, the Benedictine Abbey here at St. John's and St. John's University. So it's my experience. Oh, you don't need one.
Thank you. I'm going to pick up right where Patty left off in that I've been very interested in the Benedictine perspective and way of life for a number of years and learned a lot of things about it prior to even signing up for the trip or being chosen to go. But something like what Patty said about that, it just created this more personal connection. I mean, I think what it did is it took a lot of that information that I had learned in my head and really brought it down into my heart and into my way of living. And it was sort of like, I guess, in the classroom world, you learn things in theory, but then when you go out and you put them in practice or you live them in life, it becomes much more palpable. And that's really what the trip did for me in a lot of ways, and ways that I would say helped to transform me personally, rather than a lot of, I guess, structural changes, so to speak. So it was more a perspective that I learned. One part of that perspective was that I gained a better sense of the historical community that I am a part of and that I feel that my faith is oriented towards. Before, when I thought of spirituality, I always thought of my spirituality as something personal between myself and God. Whereas this started just really, again, in a very tangible way. The trip helped me to understand that it's not just between me and God, it's all these other people who are sharing in this same sort of journey and having these same kinds of meaningful experiences. Really lent itself to a community, both historical and present, that I didn't really grasp in the same way prior to the trip. The other thing I would say that it helped me to do is it helped me to become more vulnerable. It helped me to become more at ease with being vulnerable. Prior to the trip, I would say that I had a harder time sharing things like this about my faith with a group of individuals, especially at work, because even at a Catholic institution, I mean, different subcultures of that have different perspectives, and I would say in my department, sharing your faith is not something that's commonly done. And so I learned to compartmentalize those things. Even though personally I sort of mentally tried to integrate them, I certainly didn't espouse a lot of that. I didn't share much of that with others. And I'm getting better at that. And I'm feeling, I guess, energized or emboldened by the trip. And also recognizing, again, all of you around campus. I mean, so many, I knew the number, of how many people went on this trip, but when you see a room full of other individuals who you can now feel more at ease sharing these kinds of things with, it just makes it more comfortable. I guess one aspect of the Benedictine perspective that has been most influential, and especially in regard to my work, is the idea of understanding and accepting others. The whole idea of welcoming all as Christ. And when I knew of that initially, I thought of that as welcoming the stranger, welcoming the guest. And I think this is through my work as department chair. It didn't seem to me to be that hard to welcome the guest or welcome the stranger as Christ. It seemed to be much harder to welcome the people who you interact with on a daily basis as Christ. And I think remembering that and recognizing that each person has this story and each person has this uniqueness to their life and to their views and perspectives, and not treating them as, oh yeah, that's that person saying those things again. But remaining open to them and remaining welcoming and accepting of them has been something that has been a lesson that I've been learning and not fully implementing, but trying to learn and trying to live out much more as a result of this trip. The other thing I would say that I learned that was, I guess, very Benedictine is a different kind of pace to life that I experienced on the trip and certainly noticed among the monastic community here, but never, I guess, participated in or felt. I guess once I got to school, the hamsters started running in the head, and then my work life kicked in until the day was over, and it seemed like everything was really hectic. And I guess I'm trying to remain more grounded. I'm trying to develop that sense of pace to each day, where you don't get so wrapped up in the details of what you need to do and what needs to be done that you can remember what the important things are and who is in front of you, who is sitting with you, and that you can, again, more fully embrace them. One of the ways that I've done that is Brother Dan Morgan was the monastic person on our trip, and this summer we were going to have lunch, and he invited me to go to noon prayer prior to lunch. And so I experienced that, and I'm not really into the Psalms, so at first I was kind of like, this is a little different. But the thing I really enjoyed about it was that grounding sense of pace. And so I made a point throughout this year that I've been going to noon prayer probably 2 or 3 times a week. And it has really, again, you go once or twice and it's kind of a novelty, but you go on a regular basis, and I think for me anyway, it has created much more of a sense of that pace and that groundedness to each day. So in terms of from here on, where I plan to go with this is continuing to learn. As Deb said, that you come back with more questions than you leave with. So continuing to learn what this perspective is all about, but also to live it out and to see deeper and deeper insights of how it can affect my day-to-day life. And I also have, in my teaching, I have ambitions in the future of trying to do a more explicit connection between things Catholic and Benedictine into my course in developmental psychology, in terms of using it as a framework or an organizational lens for what kinds of material I include in the course and cover in the course, and then how I approach it, which is something that would be very different, again, from within my field, something that isn't particularly done much. So that's kind of my ambitions of where I hope this is headed.
I guess before I begin, I need to pay a sense of gratitude to Father Hillary for having faith in me to really go as a first-year junior in the monastery. So my first year asked me to go, and I'd just like to let Father Mark know that I've learned a lot more since, and it might help sending me again. But as I look at Chick's questions, I guess my way of going about answering those, I'm going to tell a story. And I'm going to tell a story because I think it embodies for me an important realization, a realization of what it means to be a part of this Benedictine community. And when I say that, I'm not just saying the monastery. I'm talking about the wider Benedict community on this campus. So before we left on our trip, I sent out an email to our group seeing if anybody wanted to go to Assisi for our free day. And initially there was large interest in going, but as the days got closer, it was clear that there were only going to be 3 of us. It was going to be Patty, Epsky, John Miller, and myself. So that morning, bought our tickets, got on the train, and took off. And the day was going great until we got close to Assisi, and the ticket controller came by and attempted to pull the wool over our eyes. She said, since we hadn't validated our tickets at Termini, the main train station in Rome, we owed her 150 euros, Patty and John, all the way to Assisi just for this to happen. So we paid the fine, and I apologized to Patty and John. And their answer really surprised me. In effect, I'm going to try to summarize this. They said that we would have paid whatever she asked. For us, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go to a place that has meant so much in our lives. And they must have seen the confused look on my face, because John Miller then went on to describe that his sister is a Franciscan, has been for 60 years. And she had led pilgrimages to Assisi for a couple decades and had just retired, and John had never had the chance to go with her. And then Patty worked with the Franciscans for 10 years. And so this was more of a homecoming of sorts for them. And so for these two, it was more than a trip to Assisi, to a small, beautiful, quaint little Italian town. This really held personal and spiritual meaning to them. And yeah, their stories really opened my eyes to the fact that as much meaning as I thought I was going to gain from this trip, from these sites, they really gained just as much or even more in some cases. And through this tour and the continued relationships, yeah, I've really come to see that you, the faculty, staff, employees of CSBSJU, yeah, really just don't have a commitment and connection to the institutions, in that sense, CSBSJU, but also to the Benedictine tradition. And as a monk that looks to make final vows, hopefully this summer, I do have to say that the tour did have, yeah, an effect on the monastic discernment. I do have to say that it's to know that you're part of a larger community that not only understands, but sees importance in the Benedictine way of life. Yeah, that's inspiring for me as I begin. And also to know that it's not just the monastic communities on either campus that really see themselves as the keepers or formers of the Benedictine mission, but it's you who live it out in your own lives, who have contact daily with students in a way that we never do as monastics. So as this Benedictine Institute continues, I do think it's important that each of us continue to share our stories, because I know personal stories of people that this trip really opened up their eyes to, what it means to be part of this community. And I also think that we also need to allow more people to do it. I don't know if we have the money for it, but I do see importance in that. So, I don't know how the finances look, but if somebody asked me, was it worth it? Yeah, I'd have to give a resounding yes.
Thank you very much. This is a kind of proof that the Benedictine community is really all of you. It's not just the monks who sing in choir, it's all of you. And into the future, it's going to become more and more important that you experience yourself as part of this Benedictine community. For our next part, we will split up into the groups. You have your group number on your name tag, and we'll just go around the circle. We have one person recording. Does everybody know who that is? Chick, are you here? Did you assign? Yes, and you don't have to report a lot, but simply record. There's a tablet there on one of the chairs. Record some of the main points that you can report back to the full group. We'll give you about 20 minutes for this. So make your way around the circle and discuss similar to how they did.
My name is Mike Connolly, and I went last June in the 2012 group. I would say that the common themes that probably came out of our group was the unbelievable and connection that many of us had with our colleagues that we went on the trip with. And we had such a great way of really getting to know members across both institutions. Managing that time away, just getting a greater sense of confidence with ourselves and then traveling abroad, understanding what the differences are with each other. And each of us also talked about that unique experience that we had when we were traveling, and it was really kind of neat to hear about. It's like, well, remember when you saw this at Monte Cassino? Or remember in the Prioress at Eichstätt? And, you know, those memories that came back. So this gathering today was such a wonderful way to just maybe not only and connect in our smaller groups, but to share our individual stories with those that are traveling. So well done.
My name is Katie Johnson. I'm from Group 3. I just want to say that I'm the embodiment of the fact that even a heathen can learn something from this trip. Some of you are laughing a little too much. What we were talking about was Brother David Paul was talking about how he integrates some of the images that he saw and, you know, had connections back to this monastic community as well, and the artwork that's in the Great Hall, that he integrates that now into his art history class. So he's more purposeful about taking images and the things that he learned, and of course that I didn't catch any of these things that he was talking about, but that he takes that and teaches it to the students. The other thing that we talked about in our group was in terms of what could we do moving forward, particularly if we are running out of money for trips, which I don't know one way or the other, but is to take members of the monastic community, and frankly probably us too, that are so inclined and are, you know, able to articulate Benedictineness, and to not just share it with the students, because I get jealous in that sense of how much the students get to be inculcated, or perhaps that's not the right word, get to experience different parts of Benedictinism than I ever do in my daily life. And what I would like to see is to have groups like they have with the male spirituality groups or whatever, but I'm not sure I'd call them that. And because then as a heathen probably wouldn't go. But to have a group that meets regularly that does exactly what this trip did, which was break down barriers of different groups in the institution to allow us to ask really stupid questions of the monastic members, to all these kinds of things that this trip did for me, to let me be slightly less cynical than I was when I left. And I think that it would be a really good thing for us to see the monastic community more involved with our community at the university, and for us to support them in that way of transferring Benedictineness to our lived experience, as Mike was saying. I'm from Group 8, and I think one of the things, as she has also said, that the ongoing tradition between Eichstätt and St. Benedict's, between Metten and St. John's, and that the Benedictine spirituality is really down to earth and practical and something that everybody could identify with, getting to know that. I think a real deepening of faith people experienced, and talking about where do we go from here, looking at Dietrich's paper, doing something in kind of a focused way. The paper is very dense and almost hard to absorb all at once, but to take one Benedictine value a month or a year or a semester or something and really focus some discussion groups around that. I think, as someone said, it kind of gave her courage to step out of her comfort zone to move into areas that are going on. I mean, there are 1,000 events almost every day going on these two campuses, and to really have courage to step out of her comfort zone and participate in those. Rick Steve's guide to tours was suggested as something that kind of got one level deeper than the ordinary tour guides. And there should be a ratio greater of gelato to the days you spend in Italy.
I'm Jean Stottlemyre. I'm from Group 2, and I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be able to talk as long as everybody before me. A very interesting analogy was brought up in our group, and that was their personal experience. It was like knowing someone for a long time and then going to meet their family and extended family. Very warm feeling. Another item was that they saw origins of places and practices around campus when they returned. I think they were just a little bit more open and maybe expanding their mind a little bit and making some comparisons.
I'm Lynette. I work for Life Safety here at St. John's, and I was privileged to go on the June tour last year. And group number 9, go 9, okay. All of us agreed that it just gives a deeper appreciation and connection with both of the campuses. We were thrilled with how the Institute puts due diligence into selecting the candidates that go and making it St. Ben's, St. John's employees, faculty, staff, male, female. Many years of service, maybe not as many years of service. We were telling Dan is a preparing member to go this summer in our group, and just to share with him that all of those folks that will be on your tour, it's just different every year from those different eclectic mix of who ends up together, and it was a blessing. For each of us on our tours that we went, to connect to those traditions and see how this little spot in Minnesota connects back to such historical places. The Benedictine ways and values, the history was just amazing to go there and live it and experience it, study it beforehand. The depth of history, to understand how it started there and what came to the campuses from there. The next one was kind of talked about the cross sections of campus. So the different places and what everyone can individually bring back to their departments, and then how we know now, you know what, I know that person at St. Ben's that I never would have met before in all these years. I never had met in 12 years before. So how we can connect what their position is and what they do on the campus to what we do, and I just think it brings that sense of community that much closer to each one of us. The preparation time together was amazing. We shared it, all of us have shared at home with our extended families, with friends, with coworkers. someone in our group said that they were able to chat with other folks that had had a touristy trip to Rome and to really realize what it meant to go on the Benedictine heritage tour to Rome and to Germany. For me, for our tour group last June, to go with Father Michael Naughton was an amazing experience. And I would absolutely have loved to have Chick as my guide. I know I would have, but it was amazing to go with Father Michael, who had been a former prior at the Abbey in Rome. And to experience and to walk the streets with him in a habit and to see what that means to people in Rome and the respect of the tradition of the religion was very meaningful. And then we all agreed that the end of the tour is set up so well to have that connecting time each day. And I think that a lot of us in our group have brought that back to our daily lives, to be in the middle of Rome and to sit on a rooftop amongst the busyness of life and to reconnect with our group, to reconnect with our day, to process how we can move ahead the next day and what it meant, what we'd experienced that day. And then to come back here and say, how do I deal with the busyness of life and how do I process that and how do I get back to my relationship with God and my relationship with self and my family and my community at work and at home and in my neighborhood. So.
Hi, I'm Carol, and I'm in Group 10. And I agree with what everyone has said so far, but the things that also came out in our group was that the areas that started out with the very simplest times, like San Benedetto, the very small church, or Val, where Benedicta came from, those really spoke to us about how hard people had to work and travel to get here and to start what's here. And so there's a huge sense of gratitude to them and to the Benedictines here and appreciating everything that's here that's growing from this start way back in this very simple one-room cells or one-room homes. Another thing that came out in our group was that there was a real conversion of experience within visiting the Vatican and the Pope, and understanding the power of God's Spirit continuing throughout the ages, and seeing the whole world, different nationalities come together, and being pulled together by the Spirit, and accepting the humanity of the Church, and appreciating each individual human's participation and growth and pulling together as this community.
I'm Ann Jonas. I represent Group 4, and I was privileged to go on the Benedictine Heritage Tour in May of 2011. And I'm not going, lots of the things that our group came up with are things that have already been said, so I'm not going to really repeat much of it, other than we focused on the close connection between the two institutions here and Europe, Eichstätt and Metten, and really all of Europe, including Rome, of course. Our group really felt that a lot of us came out of our shell by traveling with people that we had never, that we maybe didn't know at all or just knew slightly. And then I'm going to jump to the last part, which is the how to move from here. And we all said, keep it going, for sure. And we like the lunch and learn and the different things that we can learn and discuss at lunch and learns. Someone suggested that maybe future trips would be sponsored by the Benedictine Institute, but not necessarily paid for by them, but a chance for our spouses and other people to go on trips. And someone suggested an informal lunch around the statue of Benedict out by the Humphrey Theater this summer, great idea.
Everything I was going to say from Group 5 has been said. I'm Rachel Mellis. I went on the first trip in 2009. So I'm just going to, I think, end with one line someone in our group said, which was, going to all these historical places made us realize that we are just babies in the grand scheme of things. And maybe that's a good way to end right now, is to just think about the gratitude that my group kept expressing for the way that we were forced to trust each other, learn from each other, and seek help, ask questions that we might not have asked, especially of monastics who we might not have felt we could ask these kind of challenging questions of before. So we were, I think, expressing a lot of gratitude for the way that we were put in a position of learning and making connections and being like children in that sense.
We shouldn't take this for granted. It was an amazing gift that's been given to us. But what we'll be doing in the years ahead is still being decided, and we're going to continue these tours as much as we can. What's important for us now is to have some record of some of the discussions we've had and your sense of what you can contribute to the community. For example, if you want to be part of a spirituality group, write that down on the final question. Do write a memory. So questions 3 and 4 are especially important. There are pens on the table there. Before you leave, I would like it if you could leave your sheets behind. Do take a look at the kind of suggestions along the side. What are the things that speak to you the most? What would you like to try, experiment with? And if you would like to be part of a group of some kind, sign your name to it so that we can contact you accordingly. Okay? Thank you.